Welcome everyone. This is the session on reaching men and boys, lessons and tips from powerful campaigns, not only campaigns, but communications approaches in general. Um, we are going to get started fairly promptly because we're just having an hour-long session today. So we're not going to dwell too long on the housekeeping, but there will be a couple of things to mention. Good to see lots of familiar names and faces and some new people, so welcome. Just to say, this is part of the MenEngage collab. That's Learning Collaborative. It's a space where we as members can learn from each other, exchange experiences. These sessions are generally open to anyone, not just members, but they're spaces where we, have a lot of expertise around the MenEngage Alliance network and how we can draw on each other's knowledge and experience to learn in a kind of much more structured and longer term way. So once again, these are the instructions for interpretation. I am going to get started. We've got 40, 49, 50 people already, so we're just 1 minute past the hour, and I'm sure my colleagues will put interpretation instructions in the chat as well. Do introduce yourselves in the chat. Always good to hear where you're based, if you're part of an organization, where you're joining from. We're a very international network, very global community. So yeah, let us know where you're joining from today. So, as I mentioned, this is part of the collab, MenEngage Learning Collaborative, and we have some guiding principles for participation in any MenEngage space, but just typical respectful space. Obviously, we want to create spaces that are really respectful, engaging, where we also have a space for learning. So it's not that you always have to have the correct answers and know everything, but we all do take accountability for what we say and do in these spaces. And perhaps one of my colleagues can put the participation guidelines into the chat as well, which, if you're interested, takes you to a MenEngage wiki, which is we've developed for members and for anyone really, but it's mainly aimed at helping members like navigate the various structures and systems of MenEngage Alliance. MenEngage is, for those who aren't familiar or want a reminder, we're a network. We have regional networks and country networks. In blue on this map, we have spaces where members are present. And then in purple on this map is where we've actually got structured networks established for MenEngage. And that's organizations that come together at the grassroots level and because they share an interest in engaging men and boys and working with men and boys for gender equality, but not just in any way. It's really through ways that are gender transformative, um, based on human rights principles and informed by feminist and intersectional feminist thinking that obviously goes back many, many decades prior to our formation as a network. Welcome everyone who's saying hi in the chat. Okay, great to see you all. Oh, that's the wrong way. So yeah, this next slide is just to share that this session is from the communications working group of MenEngage, and that's a group. We have several working groups at the global level. There's other working groups operating at a regional level. This global working group is with representation from the different regional networks, and I wanted to share a few key priorities that we're working on for the future. One is strengthening communications capacities and how do we do communications in our field or our niche of trying to engage men and boys or trying to challenge harmful ideas about masculinity. So this session today is part of that. This working group has formed this webinar to help address that. And just to say, there's been a lot of interest in this, which has been really great. We'll try to, hopefully this will be one of several sessions, because I know there's a lot of expertise around the network on doing campaigning, doing communications. So yeah, hopefully this is the first of several sessions and we can, hear from even more examples in future. Another track here is a collaborative campaign. So really, this is an invitation for us to all join together for a campaign in November. We're trying to build this year on year. This is something the working group is anchoring. And the last 2 years were how to talk with men about gender justice, about women's rights, about LGBTQI rights, and so on. This year's campaign is decided to be more focused on not just how, but speaking to men and boys directly. So please look out for more information coming soon because we're going to be preparing this campaign in the months ahead for hopefully a successful campaign in November, calling men and boys in on gender equality. The third track that the working group is interested in is shifting narratives, and that's quite a broad term. But generally, I feel like it's a bit of a buzzword in the field at the moment with current backlash and politics as they are, which we'll be talking about a bit later. But how do we shift narratives on gender equality, or especially with regards to masculinity and engaging men and boys in ways that both remain feminist informed and accountable to feminist movements, but actually appeal to men and boys as well. So before I introduce the speakers today, I'll go into a bit more of a context that brings us here. So yeah, how to transform gender norms through campaigning or through communications. We've got male in brackets there because, as one of our speakers will discuss, taking a gender transformative approach is not just about focusing on men and boys or on maleness, but actually disrupting the idea of a hierarchy of gender norms completely. But then the second question on this slide, how to reach men and boys in meaningful ways, well, that's really about, we need to recognize that men and boys are a hugely diverse group, so many different types of men and boy out there. But at the same time, there is some kind of social or a set of social rules or guidelines about being a boy or a man. And so actually engaging with men and boys as a demographic is also really relevant and something that as an alliance we feel is really important. So I'm skipping ahead here because I've got a bit more context because I know everyone here has probably been talking already with peers and colleagues about the backlash. And basically, when it comes to some of the backlash, obviously everyone's here is probably well aware of how gender justice is very much under siege at the moment. And we're seeing huge funding cuts, women's rights work, LGBTQI rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and many human rights issues and social justice causes are having their funding just decimated at the moment, which is devastating for everyone who's, was receiving those kinds of services or being involved in those programs. When we look at this backlash, we, as MenEngage Alliance, tend to take a men and masculinities lens, or simply asking what do ideas about being a man have to do with various topics. So looking at the current backlash, there are a few trends to frame today's discussion. Firstly, we're seeing the rise of the far right, as you're all aware, which are pushing very, unfortunately, quite successfully to reinstate a very rigid, patriarchal, hierarchical idea of gender, and often with this idea of maleness or a man as the head of the family or the head of the nation. In parallel to that, we've got tech billionaires shaping what we see and hear, basically having very, very vast power in managing the platforms that we all use, and at the same time, kind of giving free rein to hate speech in the name of so-called free speech, with little or no accountability, or in many cases, actually being governments pandering to those tech billionaires and the corporate interests behind them. Another trend that I'm sure that's been well covered and I'm sure you're all aware of is the influence of online influencers and podcasters, some of them amassing vast, vast audiences, particularly male audiences, and they're blending some kind of mix of masculinity, a particular style of masculinity, often with some conspiracy theory material thrown in, and then freewheeling discussions about broad range of topics. These tend to be ones aimed at and appealing to male audiences, and these influences tend to be loosely bundled into the term the manosphere, along with a broad range of spaces that appeal to men and particularly young men at the moment. in these spaces, a lot of another track for framing today's discussion is that in these spaces, a lot of men are drawn into narratives of male victimhood, anti-feminism, outright misogyny, the sense that men are really the victims of feminism, for example. And we're seeing that covered a lot. If anyone's been following the Netflix series, the launch of Adolescence on Netflix, that show is a very powerful, a very heavy watch, but it's basically drawing the link between online spaces for men, how those, or for boys, and how boys can become radicalized into being extremely misogynistic, and then how that translates into real world violence. So we know that that's based on trends that are actually really happening. It is a fictional drama, but it's a good example of how this is such a culturally significant time for discussion about this because that show is having a lot of attention. But yeah, the real world impacts are not just about rhetoric online. They're really about violence against women, girls, against gender non-conforming individuals, as well as men and boys as well, but generally at the hands of men. So, yeah, in these spaces, we do know that boys and young men and men are often looking for connection, actually. And they're looking for community and they're looking for affirmation, often looking for support in these online spaces. So that does present an opportunity to engage with young men and with men in general through positive alternatives to breaking rigid definitions of manhood based on stereotypes about dominance or aggression or violence. Many members of MenEngage are already doing this work, which is really fantastic. And basically, today is about hearing from two of them, two of our members. They're members of the working group. Um, as I said, we know that this is a topic with a lot of expertise around the network and beyond. So hopefully we can use this kind of space to hear from more examples in future. But the two that we're going to hear from today have a track record, their organizations, of really delivering innovative, powerful campaigns or powerful communications approaches. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing from them. First up, we're going to be hearing from Sashwati Chatterjee, who lives in New Delhi, India. Sashwati has been working in the development sector for over 6 years and is currently working as the manager of digital engagement at Breakthrough Trust. She has an interest in, sorry, I'm just going to go to the slide. She has an interest in gender and technology and has long been interested in how digital spaces and feminist ideologies may interact with each other. After we hear from Sashwati, we'll be hearing from David Garzon. David is the Director of Marketing and Communications at White Ribbon. David's been with the organization for close to 7 years, implementing key programs and campaigns reaching men, boys, and all allies across Canada and the world. David holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and Latin American and Caribbean studies from York University, a certificate in critical reflections on masculinities from SISTAC in Bolivia. So thank you for joining us, Sashwati and David, and I'm very happy to hand over to you, Sashwati. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was a really excellent introduction, and I almost felt like I don't have to do my presentation. I have covered everything. Hi everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here with so many people, and I'm really happy to be talking about this. I feel like very prescient topic at this time of the year, the time of the decade almost. Um, because we have a limited amount of time, I have a small presentation which is mostly for reference, and I think I'll be talking through some of the work that we've been doing. I'll go ahead and share my screen, I think, and let me know if it's visible. I'm going to, is it visible? I'm really terrible with slideshow, yes. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we're good.
Yes. All righty. Just really quickly, because I am required to do this. I'm from Breakthrough. We're an organization based in India. We work in 6 or 7 states. And about the topic that we're talking about today, it is Tom talked about that we're going to be talking about, that I'm going to be talking about gender norm and how it ties in with men, masculinity, and how we talk to men. And I actually think that where Breakthrough comes in is interesting because Breakthrough is a 25-year-old organization and started working on women and girls and specifically about domestic violence. And over the years, as we continued the work, one of the things that we realized was that's just one angle of the problem. If you Breakthroughs, as it says here on the slide, that it wants to make its mission is to make a world where gender-based violence and discrimination is unacceptable. And as we started working with women and girls, we realized that the problem is a lot deeper rooted, and we quite sort of latched onto gender norms, patriarchal, regressive gender norms, uh, which people get stuck onto and which beyond which people can't move on from. And we realized we needed to tackle that. But that wasn't the end of it either. And that's one of the angles through which I'm entering this webinar, which is that this particular talk that I would be presenting is split into two halves. In the first bit, I will show you like 2 or 3 small products that we have created with men at the center of it. And then I'll move on to talk about how we, using like products like this, how we talk to men, specifically through digital spaces. Uh, Let me correct myself. Not how we talk to men, how we talk about gender to all our stakeholders, which in a significant portion of which are young men. The reason I'm saying this is when Breakthrough started working and we said, oh, we'll work on gender norms, we realized that a significant subsection of the people we need to talk to and the people who will make a real difference is for whom gender norms are still malleable, where we can still reach them and make and talk to them about molding and changing their ideas of patriarchal gender norms and presenting them with alternative narratives. And these are young people in schools and people roughly, as I've written, between the age of 11 to 24, and primarily adolescents and young people. We work with them and we understand, as Tom has been talking about, the things that bother them about everything from early marriages to male loneliness to the need for companionship, and tackle the norms that bring them there and help them see alternative narratives. Uh, so to start off with, I think I will, this is this is the angle for which I'm entering this talk. It's called How We Talk When We Talk About Gender. I would like to like quick apology for the sort of like kind of, this is going to look like a really basic PPT. So apologies for that already. I'd like to start off with our first video. This, I'm just going to put it on load. Very quickly, I talked about how at Breakthrough we are trying to reach young people, which includes a large subset of young men, and talk about gender norms because we believe that at that stage that they're open and willing to change their ideas about gender norms. They're open and willing to be malleable, and more importantly, they're open and willing to create alternative gender norms and be change makers in their communities. In order to do so, one of the things that we did was we went and spoke to a lot of these young people, young men, young women, etc., to find out the spaces that they're in, the content that they consume, and who they want to hear from. One of the things we found out was, for obvious reasons, popular culture is huge, which means digital media, which means TV shows, and in India, it means above all Bollywood. In America, it would be Hollywood, but in India, it's Bollywood, the biggest, possibly the biggest pop culture machine in the world. So what we did was that we realized that if young people are consuming Bollywood, why not go to the creators of these pop culture machines and talk to them about the issues we care about, and use, not so much use them, but pass our messaging through them. And this wouldn't be something, as let's say crass as like just running an ad, because like a young person would completely see it through. But what if we talk directly to their heroes, their influencers? So I want to show a quick video where we did a small talk show with with an influencer, with a very popular actor about, as you can see the title of the video, about quote unquote, who is a real man. This is a very small snippet of a larger episode.
यू आर द एग्जैक्ट ऑपोजिट। अगर कोई स्पेक्ट्रम होगा, दो अलग किस्म के मर्द, तो तुम इधर हो और फनी उधर है। तो जो फनी की बड़ी एक स्पेसिफिक टाइप ऑफ मैचो मैस्कुलिनिटी, एंग्री मैस्कुलिनिटी, वो गुस्से में रहता है, उसको फ्रस्ट्रेशंस है, वो कैसे कैप्चर किया तुमने?
चाहे हम कुछ भी बोले, हम कितने भी, चाहे मैं फेमिनिस्ट हूँ, चाहे कुछ भी बोले, लेकिन अंदर कहीं ना कहीं वो गड़ा रहता है सोसाइटी की वजह से। हम चाहे इंटरनेट में बोले, बट वो रहता ही रहता है। अब जो हम लोग कर रहे हैं इतने एक्सपोजर के बाद ब्रेक, अब वो ब्रेक कर रहे हैं बेसिकली हम सब मर्द जो छोटे शहरों के हैं। अब हमें, बिकॉज अब मैं आर्ट में हूँ, बिकॉज इतने सालों से मैं अलग अलग आर्टिस्ट से, इतने लोगों से, ऋषिकेश में, इटली से, फ्रांस से, अलग अलग लोगों से मिलता हूँ, वहाँ की सोसाइटी के का जानता हूँ, देन वी आर ब्रेकिंग इट। बट टू ब्रिंग दैट, इट इज, वो हम सब मर्दों के सारा अंदर गड़ा है। या तो गुस्सा आएगा, चिल्लाएंगे, या हो जाएंगे सम। बीच का कुछ इमोशन उन्होंने सिखाया नहीं है, मतलब
स्पेक्ट्रम पूरा मिसिंग है।
स्पेक्ट्रम मिसिंग, बीच का मिसिंग है उसके।
So I hope the audio was audible. But this is Raghav Jual, and he is a popular up and coming actor in one of, like, he was in a movie recently. He has a lot of following among young men and young women, and he's particularly popular among young men because the role that he played in the film was that of a villain, actually, where he was very, like, he was very sort of quote unquote badass, and he had a lot of following, and lots of young men follow him. But he's also one of those up and coming actors who has newer ideas. So, for example, he was an actor who brought the conversation of intimacy coordinators into the whole, like, Indian film sort of discourse. Before this, I don't think, like, nobody had an idea about intimacy coordinators. In fact, the director he brought it up with was extremely surprised about why do you need somebody for intimacy coordinators. But he's a young guy, he's a young actor, and more importantly, he's an influencer. So when he speaks this kind of language, we know that people are listening. And more importantly, as you could tell from this conversation, this was a casual conversation. This wasn't like an ad or of any kind, and it wasn't he wasn't standing in front of a screen just delivering things. This was a real heartfelt conversation between between two artists, and we felt that young people are desperate for to feel something real, to feel something organic from the people that they care about. So this was one of the techniques that we use through popular culture to talk to men, talk about gender, but in this specific case, to men. This that I'm showing you right now is a screenshot of an Instagram post, which in itself uses screenshots from a film that we had created, where it had conversations between strangers who had never met each other before, and they talked about things that they cared about. One of the things that the questions that they answered was, if you could give your father some advice, what would it be? And in this particular screenshot that we've used, these two young men, one of them is called Rakesh and the other is called Gaurav, they're having a very candid conversation, an unusual candid conversation between two young men about domestic abuse and masculinity. And the one who is speaking, Rakesh, is talking about how he witnessed his father doing domestic abuse, and how over the course of, like, sort of talking to people at Breakthrough, etc., he broke away from that definition of what it means to be a man, and that he now in fact can do the opposite thing, that he can stand up to his father and speak out against this violence. This alone empowers him. So this itself is a powerful moment. And because Rakesh and Gaurav are not only precisely the age of the people that we're working with and want to speak to, they are from the same communities. When we took this story essentially to our social medias, we had, as you can probably see from the comment section, we got a really great response because this is a very real moment. And this went really viral. It went outside of our usual small breakthrough kind of community. And we got a lot of very heartfelt responses because, as I said, this is something really real, and that young people across the spectrum could connect with it. And recognize themselves perhaps in Rakesh and Gaurav. This is the third example, and this is possibly the example that, quick pause, probably everybody will recognize the most. This is almost the closest thing that possibly we could do to an ad, but I'm showing this as an example of, this was not directed towards men and boys. This is a larger gender piece that we had created. However, the reason I'm showing this is because when we say we talk about gender, we have broken away from speaking about women and girls, etc., and men and boys separately, because we recognize that gender-based violence and gender-based discrimination and regressive gender norms have people across the gender spectrum as equal stakeholders and equal allies. So when I'm using the word men here, I'm using it extremely loosely. It doesn't mean cis men necessarily. It is across the spectrum. I'll just play the video and you will see what I mean in this case.
बड़ा बाजार। मेरा भी बड़ा बाजार है। किसी का हर वक्त ऐसे पीछा करना भी एक तरह की हिंसा है। स्टॉकिंग कहते हैं इसे। हमें क्या ये बोल के मुंह मत मोड़ देना। क्यों से भाई, मेरी फ्रेंड है यार। हाय, मैं देख रहा था वो आपको स्टॉक कर रहा था। आई होप यूर ओके। थैंक यू। देखी गड़बड़, तेज सोचो, दखल दो।
So very quickly, so this, as you can tell, is a kind of very like a standard sort of video where it's almost like a PSA on different kinds of violence. That stalking is also violence, but this also existed in a larger conversation we were having when we were doing this campaign on the different kinds of violence and encouraging people to intervene. We did a number of focus group discussions, and one of the things we heard from the focus group discussions, specifically from young men, were that young men recognize the violence for what it is. For example, they saw videos of stalking and they correctly identified it as violence, but they were hesitant to intervene because, and as they said, that they didn't want to then themselves face violence, because they would be like, if a woman is getting harassed and I show up to stop the intervention, what if they beat me up? What will I not be seen as her boyfriend? Will that not cause problems? And there was this very real fear of being quote unquote perceived a certain way, and the fear was very real. So what we did was we created these series of videos which were well received, where we recognized the problem of certain kinds of men, as the ones that do violence, but we wanted to create a like an example where a man steps forward and takes ownership of the moment, as not like a savior, but as someone as just a person who has the right to intervene in that moment and has the responsibility to do so. And in this case, this is a more direct PSA because the man directly speaks to the camera and to the presumed audience. It got good response, and we believe that while it doesn't overcome the initial problem of facing violence through while intervening, it helped men see representation of themselves in the moment, because we didn't want to create quote unquote a hero figure. We wanted to create a regular person. With that in mind, I'd like to move on to the second half of what I wanted to talk about. So all here, I were three examples of the kind of communication that we have created, and the many, like, this is just a small glimpse. Like, these aren't like the 2 or 3 buckets that we work under. Breakthrough has a long history of working on media and of speaking about gender through media. But one of the most, I would say, prominent aspects of how we speak is through our digital media. And we have largely expanded that greatly over time, and have also sort of meshed it with our popular culture work, with our mainstream work, with the videos, etc., that we have created. And I mean, we've learned a few things in how we talk about gender online and to other people. And I'd like to share a couple of these learnings with all of you, because as Tom was saying, that in this moment of sort of not just like a backlash of crisis, but a crisis in what it means to talk about gender, where there is increasingly people across the world who are sort of kind of dismissing gender. There are certain kinds of people who are gaining power who dismiss, say, things like DEI, who dismiss who like common understandings of feminism, etc. for us, we feel that it is more and more important to talk to young people, especially young men, where they are, so that as they sort of grow older and grow into their spaces on the internet, uh, it's not so easy to fall for these propagandic narratives. Because one of the things that we realized is, and I think bringing up Adolescence was an excellent example of this. Adolescence, if you don't know, right, is a Netflix show which is making huge waves in India currently. And one of the things that we've recognized is that it's the current young men getting radicalized thing that is happening that doesn't have a solution which is necessarily going to be, oh, we need to monitor their online spaces, we need to monitor their digital devices, who are they talking to. A lot of it has to be come down to them being able to tell these narratives apart by themselves. And for that, they have to have these examples with them of an alternative world. Otherwise, there are very real problems that many of these grifters or these MRDs, etc., tapping into are real problems of loneliness, of a lack of communication, etc., but whose solution may not be what they're offering. We should be able to provide these solutions for the real problems. So here's a couple of the methods that we have done. The first few are going to be just might seem very bog standard social media methods, but they've worked for us in the past and they continue to work for us till today. So I feel like they're useful in their sharing. This is a slide I use everywhere constantly all the time. But one of the things that we realized that when we wanted to talk to young people and talk about gender is that not only are there thousands of people like us talking to young people and talking about gender, they're probably a lot more convincing than we are, because we're like a development sector organization with a limited budget, and there are lots of things we can't say. So what we needed to do was we needed to understand who we are talking to, why are we talking to them, and go to the spaces that they are. So we, as I said in the beginning, that at Breakthrough, especially, I can give our example. We have sort of hyper-focused our audience, and we realized we want to talk to young people and between this age and this age. We want to go to where they are, and we want to talk about the issues that we care about, but also tying into the issues that they care about. So an example of this is our Instagram page, where we use our Breakthrough's Instagram page. I'll give a link after this talk on the comments to talk to young people. And we did a bunch of focus group discussions with them to find out, oh, what do they like? What are they watching? What formats do they like? What are the issues that they care about? And we got some interesting answers. Like, some of the answers were obvious. They like reels, they watch funny content. But some of them watch study content, because God knows exams are very important in India. But they also watch content about marriages, because marriages are also important in India. So we also caught on onto a bunch of influencers who are not, say, the problematic influencers, the small local level influencers, but because of the huge population of India who have followers in the hundreds of thousands. But you would never have heard of them because they're absolutely at the local level, at the state level, for example. I'm in a conversation, please. So at the same time, so we got onto these folks, and we sort of started creating content around them. And we also realized that a young person is using Instagram, they may not use LinkedIn. So we changed our strategies, etc., and targeted different people in different places.
So Swati, just a heads up, you got a couple of minutes left. Thanks.
A couple is 5, is 3, is 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right, I will run. Thanks for that. Just quickly summarizing, the next thing that we did was we've identified our audience. The second thing we did was, who are we? Because as we said, there are thousands of us out there. How can we be special? So here's a couple of things that we did. We wanted people to come to us for sure, because we also wanted, we had important things to say, and we knew that we could help folks out there. So we wanted to differentiate ourselves in a world of like maybe many similar types of people. Here are some of the things that we did. We were very selective about what we posted, which meant that, for example, if we were an organization talking about young people, then we talk about young people. We didn't massively expand our scope elsewhere, and we would talk about young people and gender. We also we talked about branding. We had these things that you would know about. The way we presented ourselves, the colors, etc., is also how we identified ourselves. We created a glossary in the organization where we use certain words to identify ourselves. For example, you saw the film that I showed in the very beginning with Raghav Jual, that we use that to push what we call quote unquote gender progressive narratives, because we want the idea of alternative narratives out there in mainstream, so that people aren't restricted to just the age old kind of men women narratives, etc. I'll just because of lack of time, I'll move to the next one. These are just in general, like for any future campaigns and etc. that we do. These are some general friendly social media tips that we have done that has helped us grow our audience with young people consistently. We examined these are firstly good social media tips, but at the same time, because of the nature of how we are fighting against other organizations and other, I would say, posters online who probably have people's attention more. These are the things that we did so that they would trust us. For example, we would post consistently. We would engage with people on good faith. The third point is extremely important, which is collaborate, 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 because one of the things we realized is that we work in our own small ecosystem, and young people and our particular audiences have small ecosystems of their own around, say, particular influences, and not even, again, I said the problematic influences, the small influences. So we decided to break out of our ecosystem and go to where they are, and say collaborate with, say, somebody who might be creating makeup, or somebody who might be a gym person, and decide that, okay, if the algorithm isn't sending their content our way, maybe the algorithm will send his content their way, and through it ours. We created content which platforms reward: reels for Instagram, op-eds for LinkedIn, etc. We did a little bit of, what would make, like, we have something called the thumb rule, which is if you're scrolling on a phone, what does make your thumb stop? Oh, that's interesting content. Think about it that way. And finally, but most importantly, is that we always try to be organic, which was we didn't want to create giant posters and make it look really obvious that we were creating giant posters. We didn't try to hide that we were an organization, but we wanted people to understand there are very much human beings behind this organization. So if you could please look at it from that perspective and realize we are telling you really real stories. Just a couple of more things left. This is a quick look at some of our social media stuff that we've done. The one on the right is a really popular reel that we made, which went, like, no joke, massively viral. It got some 9 million views, to the point where I had friends texting me saying, hey, have you seen this reel? And I looked at it and it was my reel. And I was like, yes, I created this. The text on it says, Beta, shadi kab karoge? Which is saying that, son, when are you getting married? And it says, like, it's a person running away from relatives, random neighbors, and parents. And that's because we've done a bunch of FGTs, and everybody is really worried about getting married, and most importantly, getting married early. This is a fear shared with young men, young women, everywhere. And it was like we touched on a pain point. Everybody wanted to talk about it. Everybody wanted to share it. And this was an example. And this was this one piece of content we created, but it changed our ecosystem overall. A lot of people started following us suddenly, and our engagement on all our posts went up, which meant we reached more people. And we know for a fact these are young people, because when we checked our analytics, our number of the age of the people that were following us was consistently still the same. On the left side, here are some comments from a review that we had done, which was interesting because the comments were sort of very engaging. They talked about male directors. They talked about patriarchal films. They talked about films which had a lot of violence against women. What does that mean? Which is precisely the kind of conversations we wanted to start and keep starting, because it's not like we agree with all the comments, but the fact that people engaged and started thinking, that was the point. And very last of all, but I feel like not least, is this. I have sort of we talked about it with Tom. I have titled this Talking with Men and Boys. It's not strictly true. What I probably should title it is Talking about Gender. In a world where it's difficult to talk about gender, in a world where people are now in their little boxes and have very predetermined ideas of what it means, is that here are some ideas and tips that I have just from our experience of trying to have these difficult conversations. One is that it's just as Tom was saying that, there are these MRA influencers like, I mean, I hate to say his name, but Andrew Tate and others of his kind. There are whether we like it or not, we have to acknowledge the power of influences and of popular culture. But that doesn't mean that we have to, be like, oh, right, so Andrew Tate is winning this. No, we have to recognize that people are on social media, and people are on social media to follow certain people, to get a certain ideology, to have a certain idea. So for us, that has worked for us is that we identified those and we went to those people who matched with us, or who at least were not quote unquote problematic, and we started a conversation with them. A really successful one that we had was during the pandemic. We talked to a very popular TV show actor who turned out to be extremely progressive, which we were thrilled about. And when we said, can we talk about domestic violence with you, and he was extremely happy to do so with with no pay or whatever. And he did a few Instagram lives with us, and we got so much engagement from a lot of young men and women who were his huge fans, who had never heard of us, but who showed up because they were like, oh, sir cares about this. Now we care about this. And we feel like it's a good inroad into that. Once we have this captive proof, one of the things we did was we realized that it's important for us and them to be on the same page. So we didn't try to force ideas. We asked questions. We asked, like, here's this incident that's happened. What do you think about it? How does this make you feel? Tell us your thoughts. We tried to have good faith discussions and engage with them. We offered them, like, we didn't want to just offer them, oh, here's a video, watch it. We wanted to offer them something more, something which respected their intelligence as young men. We offered them a critical gender lens on, oh, this movie has come out which you think feminists are saying is extremely patriarchal. Let's talk about it. Why do you think it's patriarchal? How did the movie make you feel about it? What did you like about the movie? Let's have a discussion. We also did this by conducting focus group discussions. We talked to young men. We got what the things they cared about, what they were scared of, what they feared about reading about themselves online, and we like sort of melded a lot of that in our conversational material. We also this is something that Tom was also talking about alternative narratives, that a lot of this was sort of problem, like we feel that a lot of young people, young men specifically, feel that a lot of problems are being pointed out to them, that, oh, patriarchy is bad, this way you behave is bad, etc., etc., but no solutions are being offered which are not like, stop that behavior. So we wanted to give alternative narratives, which is what we do through a lot of the products that you also saw in the beginning, where we give alternative, like, oh, men can also talk like this. Did you know that you can stand up against your father? Did you know that it's all right if you wear nail polish? It's all right if you wear a dress. Did you know that it's all right to do certain things? And we do that by giving them aspirational figures, people in their communities, people, actors that they really like talking about these issues. These are all alternate narratives and norms. And finally, just because we talked about the backlash, we've faced our fair share of trolling. But and we feel that trolling, this is going to be a controversial opinion, but perhaps it's only for us, is that we feel that trolling is not always a bad thing, depending on how it happens. In some cases, we have sometimes left a slightly provocative post, etc., knowing it's going to get some of them pissed off. And they do, and we get, but we also don't do it just for the sake of getting the numbers. We sometimes do it so that people show up and then have an argument in our comments, and we talk to them and said, what upset you so much? Talk to us about it. Let's have a little discussion. And really interesting things happen. There are, of course, cases where something really blows up, and in those cases, we obviously have to shut the post down, etc. But I think in this current state of things, some trolling is inescapable, but may not necessarily mean, as I said, a bad thing. With that, thank you so much. I think I've just in time, I hope, Tom.
We're going to be running a bit tight, but thank you, Sashwati. That was
Thank you, everybody, so much.
Thank you. And there's amazing questions coming in the chat, so please keep sharing those. Sashwati, have a browse through those.
Yes,
I'm not sure we'll have time at the end now, but we can, yeah, maybe some people would like to stay on after the call and we can carry on. I know that was just a snapshot of the work that Breakthrough works on as well, because I was speaking to Sashwati and other Breakthrough colleagues, and just the amount of creative entry points that Breakthrough is using is phenomenal. So there's so much we can learn. But yeah, thank you. And we will now go to the other side of the world, which is to hear from David from White Ribbon. If you just stop sharing your screen, Sashwati, then David can share. There we go.
Yeah, I think.
Over to you, David.
Perfect. Are folks able to see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Okay, because I keep seeing such what is, not sure why, but I mean, as long as you can see mine, then that's what matters. Um, Hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's really exciting to have a global community come together and talk about very important issues. Thank you, Tom, for the invite, and thank you so much, Sashwati, for that presentation. I think it was absolutely excellent, and I learned a lot. My name is David Garzon, or David Garzon in Spanish. I am the Director of Marketing and Comms at White Ribbon. And today I want to spend a few minutes speaking about our campaigns. A bit of background before I begin. White Ribbon, in case you don't know us, we are a Canadian organization that was founded in 1991 as a response to the Montreal massacre. Back then, a group of men got together. They realized very quickly after such a horrible incident that if men didn't speak about the prevention of gender-based violence, then we were not going to solve the issue at all. Most violence is perpetrated by men in our communities across the globe. And so if we want to change the status quo, we need to engage men as allies, as advocates, and as critical thinkers when it comes to gender norms. And so that's really what we do. I would say that most of our work, not all, but most of our work relates to PSAs, public service announcements. So those are big campaigns, and another chunk is education, workshops, and resources that we put out there. And so over the last few years, I would say maybe the last 6-7 years, our team has worked very, very closely with a few agencies to develop high-level global PSAs that speak about allyship, masculinity from very different angles. And so these are some examples of some of the campaigns that we've released over the last few years. If you want to learn more, please visit the link that is here. But I'm going to speak about our two latest campaigns. The latest one, which was released just about a month and a half ago, is My Friend Max Hate. And so just given the context that Tom shared at the beginning of the session, in which we're seeing a rising radicalization, the manosphere, we're seeing a lot of anti-feminist sentiments. We thought it would be a really great opportunity for us to address this issue in a very upfront way, to be able to bring men into the conversation and just create awareness among parents, educators, and those with youth around them about the dangers of radical ideologies online. And so I'm going to take a few minutes to show you the PSA. I think it's important to show the piece, just because I think it speaks tons about the work that we're doing. So give me a second. I just want to make sure that I am sharing my audio. Tom had reminded me of this early on, but I did not click on the option. Now it should be ready. Can folks see my screen? Okay, wonderful. So please let me know if you can hear, and I'll move forward and push play.
I can, David, I can see your Zoom screen. I couldn't see the film.
Okay, were you able to see my presentation before?
Yeah, we had the presentation. Then
So-
when you reshared, yeah,
Okay.
something went wrong.
So let's try it all over again. It's been years using Zoom, and here we are still figuring it out. Can you see?
There we go. Yeah, okay.
Made some leftovers, okay? I know you had a bad day. Can we talk about it tomorrow? Yeah? Sorry, I have to go. I love you, okay?
Love you.
You'll be good? Okay? Love you.
What are we at now, 5?
Oh my God, 5 games in a row, headed to the playoffs.
Dad, we just can't stop winning.
That home run you hit, I think it landed in the parking lot.
Oh, for sure.
Throw the ball around more tomorrow. is yours. Stop waiting for permission. You're either a predator or prey. Be a predator.
What the?
Quit feeling and start lifting. If your will is leading you, it's simply because you're a loser. We need strong men now, more than ever.
Shiloh, phone.
Pride has been stolen from you.
Loser. Shut up, you're the loser. Shiloh, stop, boys! I can't believe you, Shiloh.
Nice. If you want her, take her.
Hi, Casey. Hi. Come on.
Yes. Post it. Come on, you're strong or you're nothing. She's sloppy seconds. You don't want that. We are at war.
You know I don't like you watching these videos.
I don't care.
Shiloh,
You are a warrior.
stop it! Give it to me!
Her body is your choice.
You ruin everything!
Slap her! Choke her! Shut up, bitch!
Right. So every time I watch this, I get goosebumps, to be honest. And so as I mentioned, this is our latest PSA. It was released back in February, and as you could see, it tells the story of a young boy called Shiloh, who struggles with loneliness, with bullying in school, not being able to build relationships, and starts consuming online content from really hateful influencers. And I think that the creative piece was really interesting, how they pitched, how the agency that we work with pitched this idea of working with a puppet, and then the child eventually becoming a puppet himself. I think serves really well in countering the narratives that we're seeing online. A lot of the selling points that a lot of these influencers are using are just being rebellious, going against the current, and things like that. And on our ends, as professionals doing masculinities work for decades, we know that that's not the case. We know that unfortunately they are just leveraging traditional gender norms that we've known based on experience and evidence are very toxic and very harmful to young men and people around them. And so we wanted to bring this to light. Our campaigns are usually they come together with a website that will bring information to our target audiences. In this case, we were not talking specifically to youth. We were talking to parents and educators. We wanted to give them some of the key terminology so that they could navigate these conversations, so that they could engage young boys, and so that they could be aware of the issue itself. Something that is quite common right now is that we might engage educators, we might engage parents, and they have absolutely no idea of what's going on online. They really don't, you know? And it's happened to some of our colleagues that they show max hate, and folks might come after the session and say, okay, now I understand better why I'm seeing this behavior from my kid. I wasn't able to tell why, and now I'm drawing those connections. And so that's been our main goal all along. Something that we've done fairly recently, and it was a change in how we usually did PSAs, was that we were a lot more intentional with our social media content. For the previous campaigns, short life stories, the pictures that you saw at the beginning of my presentation, I think this was important, but not as important as this time around. This year we were very intentional in creating social media specific assets that would speak to youth audiences, that would speak to those who are navigating the online world only through those channels, being mostly TikTok and Instagram. And so Max Haight got his own TikTok page with a lot of engagement. We were able to, through this social media strategy, then be able to get the attention of a lot of influencers. We got some parent influencers that were resharing our content, and one of them even got 1 million views for the PSA, right? So the digital landscape looks very different right now, whereas before we were using YouTube mostly, and I think it's a very, very relevant tool still. We are now looking at that element of collaboration that our colleague spoke about before, which is very fundamental today. Just being mindful of time, I'm not sure if I'm going to share the next PSA that I wanted to present, but I'm going to show some of the social media clips that we have. I wanted to show you this one as well. This one is from the fall of last year, November of last year. But it's one of the reasons why I wanted to present it is because it contrasts quite a lot to Max Haight.
And David, before you go ahead, sorry to interrupt, but
Yes.
yeah, the interpreters have shared that they will be able to stay on. So if you're good to stay on, then I think we can go over. Obviously, I'm sorry to everybody who won't be able to stay. Everyone who's here participating, you're welcome to stay on after the hour. Apologies, it was advertised to finish at an hour, but go ahead, David, if you're okay to stay on. And
No
Sashwati,
worries.
there's lots of questions in the
100%.
chat as well.
Happy to stay for folks who are using the Spanish interpretation and might still have access to that. If you want to post any questions in Spanish, I'm more than happy to answer. I speak Spanish, so happy to address anything that might come up. I'm sorry about this. So moving forward with this piece, again, I'm going to show you some of the social media clips, but in a nutshell, we were implementing a project on online sexual exploitation. And when you speak about the issue broadly, of course, you want to address online dangers. You want to address how youth are being groomed and how they're being exploited online. But something that we also want to address is the root causes of the issue, right? And we know that gender norms play a very strong role when it comes to online sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. And we wanted to look at how a lot of young men are also enabling a space where sexual exploitation is allowed, it is existent. We wanted to challenge gender norms. We wanted to speak to men in a way in which they could empathize with our cause and see that there is something that they can get from feminist, informed, from a new vision of masculinity. And so we did an entire campaign based on something that is very relatable to a lot of people, which is the act of gifting flowers, right? You ask a lot of female identifying people in our communities, have you ever received flowers? Many times the answer is yes. You ask men, and very often the answer is no. And so we wanted to explore this idea and get men thinking about why this happens, right? So instead of a PSA in which we leveraged a lot of actors and a lot of talent, this time we went into our own communities. We worked with people who are even our staff. So here to the right is Abraham, my colleague, who at that point had joined White Ribbon a week before, right? We spoke to some of the youth that have been part of our committees. We spoke to some of our program participants from sports, from corporate, and we did some interviews about this entire idea of receiving flowers. And so I'm going to show you maybe two.
When I think about my childhood and my upbringing, I feel like I was surrounded by stereotypes. I feel like I was constantly being put into this box. I guess when I was younger, I used to do figure skating. I was maybe 11 or 12, and I didn't tell any of my friends about it because I was embarrassed. I definitely tried to put more of that responsibility onto my parents and be like, oh, well, like, they put me in it, they forced me, I don't want to do this anyway. which is not true because I love to figure skate. And I think even these days, like when I talk about things that I did growing up, those stereotypes have stuck with me, you know, like the things that I was maybe taught or encouraged to be ashamed of when I was younger. I know now it's not true and that I don't need to be ashamed of the things that I like, but it still kind of follows you.
Just because I really love the interviews with Aiden, want to show you the other piece, the other social media piece that we did with him, because I think it speaks a lot about how a simple conversation about flowers, something that is everywhere, can lead to really good conversations.
How do you feel about the statement that men don't want flowers?
I would say that's a very big statement. I think anytime someone says men don't or women don't, I immediately know what they're going to say next is just not true. I think many men, myself included, enjoy the feeling of being appreciated and receiving flowers or other expressions of appreciation and love.
So I'm just going to drop the full PSA on the chat box so that folks have access and can watch it later. Again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to play it, but you can find it there. And I am going to finish by maybe tying both campaigns, which again are very different, with some key elements that are present in both and some key lessons that we've learned along the way. So first of all, addressing really relevant topics has been really key for us. With the manosphere, it's pretty obvious. Again, with Tom's introduction, I think it was a really good perspective as to why we're doing this work right now. And then with flowers, I think it's not as obvious, but just knowing how strict gender norms have become for younger generations, just going back to the very basics as to why it is beneficial for me as a young man to step out of gender norms and look into characteristics like empathy, showing emotion, being able to be vulnerable, I think is really key. So addressing those relevant topics and making them relatable has been really key for us. Using various angles whenever we call men into being allies. And so, for instance, when you look at Max Hate, it was really important for us to speak to role models. Hey, do you have a younger sibling who is male identifying? Do you have students, kids that are male identifying? You can be a role model for them. You need to demonstrate that there are other ways that what they're seeing online, because ultimately, when we look at these role models that are influencer, podcasters, and whatnot, they're showing the wrong ways. And so what can you do to step up and be a good role model? For Men Don't Want Flowers is more a call to look inward and look into your own feelings and look at what limitations gender norms put in the way you present yourself in the world, the way you do your own individuality, which is very beautiful in so many ways. And so those calls to actions, which is what I'm referring here to with this acronym CTAs, those call to actions are really important. We have to be very bold and very intentional about what we call men to do, and also meet them where they're at. Storytelling is really important. You saw two very different examples of this, but just being able to show the human element of our work is very important. So from Max Hate, the story about Shiloh, and then from Flowers, just being able to bring different real voices that don't feel scripted, that feel very, very, very real and relatable was really key. And I always encourage my colleagues to think about the storytelling, not just as telling one single story, but presenting human life as a story. And so looking at the diversity of what is storytelling and what it can look like, I think is very key. And then one key lesson that we've had over the last year, I would say, is that the digital context has become a lot more complex. And whereas we used to do mostly just PSA and web, now we're including traditional media. You know, we have an entire PR branch that is working along with us to raise our new campaigns to traditional media, embed the importance of our work within news, what's going on in the world, and then more important or equally importantly, social media, being able to adapt any type of campaign to social media, not just posting the PSA on Instagram and Facebook, but adapting specific pieces intentionally to social media, leveraging influencers and folks who align with our cause is really, really important. And so I'm going to leave it there, and I kind of stay here for a few more minutes in case there are more questions or comments on this.
Thanks, David. Yeah, there's been some really good questions in the chat. And yeah, everyone should just check out all of the PSAs of the public service announcements of White Ribbon, because there's incredible, powerful ones on a range of topics. And I think you've really created a strong reputation, I would say, for developing these emotionally gripping, often like quite powerful and quite sometimes very heavy, as we saw in the film you just showed, topics. Uh, so Shwati, are you able to stay on? Because I know we're a bit over the time, but if colleagues want to stay around, we could do a short Q&A. If you're able to, yeah, put your camera back on. Great, so we can roll back in the room. Thank you again for these great presentations. I think some of the things that have struck me are really, one thing you said, David, is the two campaigns are vastly different in budget size. So I think that's something that struck me, is like, how are we going to come up with a campaign that's got a video that's got a director, that's got casting, that's got actors, that's got lighting, and all these, and but just to share that you told me that the Men Don't Want Flowers one, how did you do that in a way that was kind of any organization pretty much could do something creative?
Represent that. And I think we go back to the conversation about collaborations and partnerships. So as a small nonprofit, we are really just a project-based 20 people, and that's very recent. We used to be 5 people organization. We rely a lot on partnerships and really touching the hearts of those who can help us. And that's been key for both campaigns. And so for Ben Simon Barn, which is a massive agency in Canada, which produced Max Hate and some of all their previous PSAs. Same as with Candy Box, which is a very small agency that does small projects here and there, just based out of Toronto, where I am. In both cases, it's been key to reach out, say, hey, this is what we stand for. Would you be able to work with us? We cannot compete against your corporate partners. We cannot afford the same level of budget. Are you able to, work with us? And in both occasions, the answer has been yes. That doesn't mean that every time we reach out to somebody, the answer is yes. There's been so many examples of situations in which, unfortunately, folks cannot work with us, even if they align with us in terms of our mission. But we've been really lucky to land on those partners. And I think that for the Flowers campaign, it was fairly easy to bring in some of our community partners too. So as I mentioned, all of the folks that were interviewed there, they've known us for at least a year, but even more, right? Some of the youth, they've been working with me for 2 or 3 years. And so it was fairly easy to say, hey, we know pretty well where you stand in terms of your commitment to gender justice, gender equity. We have a small honorarium. Will you be able to come and do this interview for us? We'll drive you, we'll feed you, and we've been lucky to always hear yes as a response. So that's really how we've navigated this. And moving forward, as we build more relationships with influencers, which is what we're doing right now, the conversation has been very similar. And luckily, it seems like we're able to move in that direction of relying on those who believe in our cause to amplify our mission.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's interesting. Both of you have shared these kind of like using your own network of people and bringing in people who can provide an authentic voice to these kind of conversations. That's another thing that struck me, especially Sashwati, with the videos you shared, is that sense of authenticity. Could you share a bit about that and like how important that is for reaching people?
I think it's one of the primarily important things, because one of the things that we've constantly done and we've constantly reworked is that, like, Breaks used to be a very different organization at one point. It was very tied on, say, making certain kind of videos and doing stuff on television.
Mm.
I won't say people have moved away from television, but people have definitely moved into different places. And we realized that people, young people, the people that we're talking to have so much fast-paced information that they're constantly reading that they can tell in one glance if something feels inauthentic to them. We're not even getting to the front door. We're not even on the front lawn. We're probably in a different city if
Right.
it's not even. So we like if for me as a social media user, social media can feel like a big bunch of nothing burger. But if we can penetrate through all that and give something real, which means that we have to work with real stories, we have to work with real feelings and all of that. We can't manufacture things. Then there is a chance that that somewhere somebody then we get messages that this really touched us, that it felt real. It's the only thing that you've got after a point in dealing with these emotions.
Yeah, really good. So you're leveraging your networks and you're finding those authentic stories that
Yeah, yeah.
overlap with the issues that we're trying to put forward. And I think that's really what's really powerful. Some of the questions from the chat are really interesting, and I think we've got some about that sense of offering boys something that shows that we care about them. This comes from Simon. So thanks, Simon.
Mhm.
Um, Simon's often raising this actually amongst the network, so I really appreciate that. But how do we offer them not just to call out characters like the online influencers, but what do we offer them that shows that we deeply care about them as well? And it's not only in the interests of, preventing violence against women and girls.
Can I go ahead with
Yeah.
yeah. So I think there's one of the things that we work at BT is we work on like what seems to be like more standard media literacy, because we realize that even beyond the authenticity and everything, uh, a lot of young people simply don't know. Uh, like they don't know if something like there's a lot of fake news, there's a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of just propaganda disguised as well-meaning things. So, and we saw this happen like in front of us firsthand when there was whenever there is political movements in India, there's all kinds of we have WhatsApp groups where we see all kinds of narratives start up, and the thing that we constantly tell these folks is that we're teaching you to slow down and read things because it's important for you and your health, to be doing this, to be looking at how you're looking at the world. Like there's that age-old internet saying, which is that if there is something there and it immediately makes you angry, consider the agenda behind it. And we want the young people that we work with to realize that they have the power to not be swayed by everything, to tap into. They don't have to be angry all the time. They don't have to be frustrated all the time. There can be a righteous anger. There can be a righteous need that can be funneled into something meaningful. Many young people that we talk to all the time are sort of live in this box of that this is not possible. We're not allowed to do this. This can't exist. Instead of there are things that can be done, and there are people out there making me feel like I can't do them, and I can get out of this. So it's and that sense of caring, because we work with community developers who directly work with young people, that sense of caring comes across.
Yeah, for sure. I think that resonates because we're saying that breaking free of rigid stereotypes around masculinity does benefit you. You can live a more whole and full life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that aligns with supporting gender justice. So, and I mean, I guess hopefully this is a discussion in the field. Like it should be enough to just support gender justice without it having to be benefiting you. But it does benefit you as well if you've been socialized to be in a restricted box of masculinity. So it doesn't need to compete with who's benefiting. It does benefit everybody.
It benefits everybody
Yeah.
if it works out in our book.
Yeah, I think that sense of showing that we care, that these kind of campaigns or any other resources we offer. I know that you all have some. David, do you have any examples of resources that show how like the men and boys could feel like their issues are being cared for or listening to? So like things that complement the more I guess, the more direct approach of the max hate, where it's calling out the toxic, harmful influences.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, not to be redundant, but that point is really important for us. The idea of what's in it for me and what do I get from stepping out of gender boxes. Sometimes youth are really good at finding the answers to this, right? Sometimes we're going to ask them, hey, what's for you, what's traditionally a man, and they'll say strong, angry, not showing emotions, stoic, and all that. And we'll just ask them, hey, and what are the consequences in your life for you of sticking to those roles, and they'll be able to say, well, in my relationships, I will not be as open and as vulnerable. That's going to hurt how people are seeing me around me. And that's also going to hurt my own self-esteem and so on. And so it's really relevant. And I think apart from the Men Don't Want Flowers campaign, I think another piece that addresses this is our Manbox video. I'll look it up in a second. Oh, I have it right here. I always have everything ready. So this is another piece that I really like. It's from a campaign that we did in house that also got a lot of traction. Again, with a very small project called Redefine. Let me just share the link.
While you grab that, David, I think, can we address another question that came up? And we have to wrap up a little bit soon. I actually have to go because I'm looking
For
after
sure.
my son in a little bit. But basically, one of them was about the intersectionalities of class and caste. This came from Alan Gregg and Sashwati. I think you had a bit of a side conversation in the chat. Do you want to speak to that one a bit?
I sort of answered it, and in India's context, unfortunately, in our experience, the answer is a difficult one because on one hand, it is absolutely caste, class, community play a huge role in masculinities, in the way how men in different communities behave with each other, how it affects women around them, what expectations there are of men of different communities. Yeah, I mean, there are papers and papers and papers written on it, and it's a very difficult minefield to navigate in India. Precisely why we've we've kind of been forced into this corner where we can't address these conversations publicly because of the nature of the political atmosphere in India. It is unfortunately we do live in a right-wing authoritarian government. We can't talk about these things. However, these are very real things that we talk about in smaller, you know, group discussions. But it's not something we can do publicly.
Yeah. Well, I think there's obviously we're talking about different kinds of hierarchies, and in the end, we're talking about breaking those down. So I guess, is there an opportunity for people who have been put in a box that puts them in a lower social status?
Oh, 100%,
Yeah.
1,000,000,000%,
We
1,000%.
can help them become more empowered to break those kinds of stereotypes as well.
So the positive answer I can give about this is that within communities themselves, this is happening. We work in areas where different villages and different communities can be identified that, oh, this is a marginalized community, like this is a Dalit community, etc. And because of that, they get certain treatment. And because of that, and young people within those communities, especially young men, have become get empowered, stand up for their rights, etc. But it's still a very long haul for it to even cross the it's like trying to solve the big racism problem right now. It's a countrywide problem. So on a scale of self-empowerment and gaining confidence, yes, but the rest of it is an ongoing fight.
Yeah. So thank you. I think we're going to have one quick question because it came up in the chat, and I'm also interested in how you manage the focus groups, because I think we're talking about developing narratives and messages that resonate with boys and men. You're testing these on boys and men. I think we want to learn, and I'm sure other people here, thanks to everybody who stayed on, by the way, how do you put those together? How do you bring men and boys in? And what can you gain from running a focus group where you actually just run some of these ideas past some people?
So we've done a bunch of different focus groups. A majority of the recent ones we have done in the communities that we work in because we are running programs in those communities, and they're with the young men that we work with there. A portion of those are what we call highly engaged young men. There's 2 or 3 per community, and we call them team change leaders. The way we run it is purely thematic. So it depends on the questions that we have. So for example, we ran a very focused focus group discussion on just Instagram, how young people use Instagram and what we use Instagram for. And because of the answers we got from that, we completely overhauled our Instagram strategy because they kind of looked at our Instagram page and laughed at us, which was very humbling. But also like it's good to, and we were like, they were being very polite in the beginning, and we were asking them kind of questions about, oh, what kind of content do you like, who do you go to, etc. And they were giving little non-committal answers. And I realized halfway through this is not really working. So I asked them, here's our page. Do you like it? And there was a resounding like, no. They didn't like it. Would you come to our page? No. Would you, if you saw this content on your feed, would you look at it? No. And I said, okay, right. So clearly that's a good signal. Show us what you like. And that was really revealing in terms of kind of, they showed us videos that they like. And this was very sad for me to learn. They straight up told me, we don't, like they said, Didi, we don't read anything. We don't read anything. Here are the videos we watch. And I was like, oh, I feel sad. I feel like there's a reason that right-wing influencers have so much growth, but that's a conversation for another day. But the focus group discussions that we have, which are more formalized, those we don't do with people in our community. But the ones that we've done recently have kind of evolved from a set of focus questions into open discussions about what content people consume.
Yeah, wow. So that's very revealing to just put yourself out there to people and then
Yeah, not fun. Yeah.
to tell you that you're not connecting with them at all.
Yeah.
How, incredibly useful that is. There's a question about accountability to marginalized groups. How do you maintain that, including accountability to women and girls in focus group discussions? Well, you are a women-led organization, so
We call ourselves a gender organization, not really women's rights anymore.
okay, sorry.
Accountability
How
in I just if
so
if
accountability generally as MenEngage, we're thinking of how you have a conversation like that in a way that's accountable to women and girls and the feminist cause. Because if you get a group of guys together and have a conversation, sometimes it can be an echo chamber for like.
So we did one in which so no, we actually don't have the accountability problem. We have another problem, which is that even if we do if we do we have done with young men, like large groups of young men, we have a bigger problem, which is that usually it's us women who are doing the conversations, and it takes a lot of pushing to get genuine answers out, because as women asking questions we get certain answers, very clean answers, and we have, like, when we put men into the room, even the men that we work with have a certain quote unquote clean reputation, that these are good boys, and it can be difficult to get genuine answers. It requires a lot of pushing and prodding. So it's not so much the accountability problem, it's just uh, it's the trustworthiness problem. Can they trust us with their real selves?
Yeah, how to break down their walls and their barriers, because they'll give you like the correct answers, for example. They know what.
I mean, I sometimes wish they would be less accountable and just say, oh no, I really hate it when girls do this.
And I
That
think
gives more insights.
a lot of our members run workshops with boys. So like one of the challenge, and I've been in this situation, is just you're spending the first 20 to 30 minutes of a workshop trying to get them to open up, and there's different activities and kind of strategies for doing that. We could carry on, but I'm going to wrap it up there because we're already 23 minutes over. We've addressed a few of the questions, and thank you everybody who's stayed on, which is still a good number of people. So thank you for joining us. As I said, we're really going to try to keep these discussions going. There was a lot of interest in this particular collab session. The communications working group can take this back. We know there's so many examples of using communications and campaign approaches across the network and beyond, to be honest. We've started documenting and mapping some of those. I'm hoping we can do something with a mapping of all the different kinds of campaigns. So fingers crossed we get to do something with that. We also have a campaign in November. And so just for everybody on this this session, please do look out for how to join in with that campaign, because this is something we're aiming to mobilize annually for everybody in the field who really wants to engage men and boys, specifically through gender transformative approaches. And I guess the overlap between messaging that's gender transformative and messaging that really appeals to your average man and boy, but contextualized for different contexts and different people. So we're looking for that sweet spot with those those kinds of messaging, and drawing on all the expertise that we have. So yeah, thank you to the interpreters for staying on. Thanks to my colleagues who've been in the chat supporting, and thank you, David. Thank you, Sashwati.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Yeah.